Pathology, GMC Srinagar, to come to the stage. Sir will be giving an inherited bleeding disorder.
Respected Professor Bilal, Head of Department of Pathology, Blood Bank and the Hemophilia Center, my colleague from the faculty, Dr. Altaf, members from various hemophilia associations from various chapters across the country, and my dear friends. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. It's good afternoon right now. Now, as we talk about bleeding disorders per se, as far as bleeding disorders are concerned and inherited bleeding disorders are concerned, even in the medical fraternity, there is quite a paucity of knowledge regarding these disorders outside of hematology circles. And the general public as such is quite unaware of these disorders. Now, at best, for example, a resident staying in the medicine casualty, in the surgical casualty, a radiologist, a pathologist, a pediatrician, when a patient comes with bleeding diastasis, the first thing that the resident thinks is maybe hemophilia. That's the maximum. And as far as hemophilia is concerned, even with hemophilia, it's fine that I speak in English. We should shift over to whatever you are comfortable. Chalega? So, majority of doctors are not aware of inherited bleeding disorders per se and how to go about it. And the whole, I think the idea behind our being together here is basically to raise awareness regarding this problem. Now, as far as hemophilia is concerned, we all know that it is an inherited bleeding disorder. But there are various other inherited bleeding disorders as well. Broadly speaking, if I'll try to make it as simple as possible so everyone understands this. As far as bleeding disorders are concerned, there are two major categories of bleeding disorders. One is a bleeding disorder which occurs primarily because of defects of platelet function, diastasis, that occurs primarily due to defects in clotting factors. Now, as far as defects in clotting factors are concerned, hemophilia everyone knows about. Many people know about hemophilia. But the vast chunk of disorders which are there, which are associated with other manifestations, there is a total lack of knowledge even among the medical fraternity. When we talk about platelet disorders, first of all, what we need to understand is the basics of coagulation. जिसको हम खून जमना कहते हैं. Patients, why do certain patients bleed? Why don't normal individuals bleed even with trivial trauma? Now, to understand that is paramount, because if we understand the mechanisms which are implicated in bleeding and the mechanisms which are involved in coagulation, in formation of the primary hemostatic plug, and the various intricacies that are involved, then only we'll understand what are the clinical manifestations of the disease. Then only we can know what are the various diagnostic modalities. And then only we can know why certain treatment options are preferred and why certain treatment options are not preferred. So it's very important to understand that what happens primarily. See, for example, there are two ways. There is any breach in the vascular endothelium. जो हमारी खून की रगें होती हैं, तो खून उनमें बहता है, ऊर्जा होता है, और bleeding primarily वहाँ से ही होती है. So what is the mechanism? For example, in a normal individual, it does not have any inherited bleeding disorders. And I wouldn't use the term normal individual because people who have hemophilia, they are also normal individuals as well. They just are suffering from a disease which is there. So what that also. So they will know about the coagulation cascade which is there. They will know that there is an intrinsic pathway, there is an extrinsic pathway, there is the common coagulation cascade. But that is something which is there to make you understand what the coagulation process is. It is not necessarily what happens in vivo inside the blood vasculature. So when we say extrinsic, intrinsic pathway, common coagulation pathway, it's just to make you understand that these pathways are there. Otherwise, the process is basically altering simultaneously inside the vasculature. Now, once we understand the lining of the blood vessels, once it is breached, for example, whether there is an injury or any other cause, what happens initially is that there are two important factors. One is the von Willebrand factor. The other one are the platelets itself. Platelets are the most important part of coagulation, even of coagulation, not of coagulation, because the entire coagulation process takes place on the surface of these platelets. Now what basically primarily happens is that once there is a breach in the endothelium, there are two ways in which coagulation normally or the hemostatic blood basically comes into play. The one is there are cells lining the sinusoids, as well as the macrophages of the liver, which are known as Kapha cells. So that is the primary site where this factor VIII is produced. Whereas 1 milliband factor is primarily produced in the endothelial cell linings, it's produced by the megakaryocytes and the alpha granules of the platelets. But what is important is that factor VIII, once it is secreted in the circulation, its half-life. Half-life in common terminologies, the time that basically the moiety is active in the circulation. Its half-life is just 2.5 hours. But once this factor VIII in the circulation, it combines and forms a complex with 1 milligram factor, and its half-life suddenly increases to 12 hours. So, in cases of 1 milligram disease, there is, as far as the inheritance patterns are concerned, there are two types of inheritance patterns. One is an autosomal dominant pattern, one is an autosomal recessive pattern. Many doctors, even specialists, fail to understand this because in med school our genetics is not very strong. So certain diseases, we just try to make up that certain diseases autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive. But these diseases have certain phenotypic expressions which have clinical relevance. For example, in 1 milligram disease, if it's inherited as an autosomal dominant trait. Now, what does autosomal dominant trait mean? For example, there are two individuals. One of them is a carrier of a disease. They get to marry each other. In the offspring, if the inheritance pattern is an autosomal dominant pattern, that means they will just get one copy of the chromosome from one of the parents, which in medical terminology is known as alleles. So there is just a 50% chance that this individual will have that disease. This is known as an autosomal dominant pattern. So clinically, diseases which are autosomal dominant have got their clinical manifestations are less severe. Whereas diseases which are autosomal recessive means they are known as alleles. If an individual receives both of the alleles from both of the parents which are defective, the disease transmission is said to be autosomal recessive. Therefore, the clinical manifestation of an autosomal recessive disease is more severe. As far as 1 milligram disease is concerned, 1 milligram disease, there are three types of 1 milligram disease: type 1, 2, and 3. In type 1, basically it's an autosomal dominant pattern. That means just one of the alleles is defective. Happens there are certain mutations occur, and there is a substantial amount of 1 milligram factor which is produced, but it's relatively less. So these patients do not manifest usually with bleeds, spontaneous bleeds. It's a very milder form of the disease. The second one is type 3, in which there is the pattern 1 milligram disease is associated with hemophilia. In type 3 disease, they are an autosomal dominant, they receive this disease in an autosomal recessive pattern. What happens is that there is hardly any 1 milligram factor. So if there is hardly any 1 milligram factor, there will be nothing of the 1 milligram factor to which the factor VIII would attach. So these patients, the factor VIII would be in circulation, but it would be destroyed or it would be removed from circulation very early. So they have a phenotypic expression of hemophilia in these patients. And therefore, patients of 1 milligram disease present with a raised partial thromboplastin time, which is not well known. Usually, these 1 milligram disease manifests with a prolonged bleeding time, and they have a normal platelet count. Their PT is normal, but their APTT is deranged. Now, their APTT is deranged because it causes a conformational decrease in the circulating levels of factor VIII. So they lead to a hemophilia-like state. There is the other type of 1 milligram disease, which is known as pseudo 1 milligram disease, which is also known as the platelet-derived 1 milligram disease. It's a part of type 2. I'm not going into details on that. Now coming on to hemophilia per se. See, hemophilia, we have 5-6 minutes more. As far as hemophilia is concerned, unfortunately the term hemophilia in Greek means blood loving. Unfortunately, it's a misnomer for the disease. Anyway, the first descriptions of hemophilia that are there in medical literature date back to the medieval times, in the 9th century Christian era, during the Umayyad dynasty, which was ruling in Cordoba, which is present-day Spain, Al-Andalus. There was a physician. He was basically, he's known as the father of modern surgery as well, Al-Zahrawi. He was the first individual who described an inheritance pattern for diseases of bleeding disorders. So he was the first person who described hemophilia in terminologies of that these patients have an inheritance pattern. Then also talking of hemophilia, there are certain descriptions of hemophilia in certain religious scriptures as well. As far as the Talmud was concerned, it was said if two siblings who have had circumcision and have bred profusely, then the third sibling should not undergo circumcision, so on and so forth. So that is how initially hemophilia came about. The manifestations of hemophilia have been there. Then as we move on forward, in the 19th century, there was a Philadelphia physician who was attributed as being the first person who had described hemophilia in the modern era. He was a physician from Philadelphia, Dr. John Olto. 50s, 1960s, when it was known that hemophilia occurs because of factor VIII deficiency. But then again, it was suffering from bleeding disorders, received plasma concentrates of infected individuals, and they went on to develop immunocompromised states. But now hemophilia has moved on. Obviously, since recombinant hemophilia, recombinant factor concentrates were developed. But then again, as I'm sure Dr. Altaf will talk about it later on in treatment, there was a problem of development of antibodies. Because see what happens in severe hemophilia, the factor concentrate is less than 1%. So obviously, even if you are giving a recombinant factor, the body will recognize it as non-C. The problem of antibody, what it did is that it basically circumvented factor VIII. Factor VIII is not any. What it did is that factor VIII, basically what it does is that it activates factor IX, it's a cofactor. So this emicizumab, it directly activated factor IX and factor X. So there wasn't any need for factor VIII. And this problem of antibodies against factors was circumvented to a certain degree. It's a costly factor, but nowadays, as far as hemophilia is concerned, hemophilia may become a treatable disease. As far as 2016 is concerned, FDA approved one of the drugs based on gene therapy. Now, gene therapy is something which is coming up, and in the years to come, maybe hemophilia can be entirely treated with gene therapy. There is something which is known as an adeno-associated virus. They are DNA templates, basically, which are being used, and in 2016, in the West, usually gene therapy has been widely used for hemophilia B. And just last year, in 2023, FDA approved a similar product for hemophilia A as well. So that is how the cycle of hemophilia has come about. And I think what is more important, just cutting short here, that it's very important to know regarding the various manifestations of hemophilia. How to diagnose hemophilia is very important. How to differentiate hemophilia from other bleeding disorders is important. So I think that's quite important, and I thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your knowledge with us and discussing an important topic in such an articulate manner. I request Mr. Syed Majid to present a memento, Professor, Department of Pathology, GMC Srinagar. Dr. Sarwar Muzaffar, Medical Officer, ex-in-charge, Hemophilia Daycare Center. Mr. Mohammad Abdullah Sofi.
मेडिकल वाले केयरलेस से ये हकीकत थोड़ी है, ये सब शोहरत है, ये सदाकत थोड़ी है। पेशेंट केयर करते हम दिल व जान से, पेशेंट केयर करते हम दिल व जान से, बाकी डिपार्टमेंट छुट्टियां मनाते हैं आराम से, सब ड्यूटियां करते हैं, लेकिन हमारी तरह इबादत थोड़ी है। लोग कहते हैं मेडिकल वाले केयरलेस है, ये हकीकत थोड़ी है। कोविड-19 में हमारे स्टाफ ने दिखाया था कमाल, कोविड-19 में हमारे स्टाफ ने दिखाया था कमाल, गाउन और मास्क पहन के खुद ही हो गए बेहाल। हम हॉस्पिटल की बैकबोन है, हमें कैल्शियम की जरूरत थोड़ी है। लोग कहते हैं मेडिकल वाले केयरलेस है, ये हकीकत थोड़ी है। हमें ट्रांसफर से फर्क नहीं पड़ा, हमें ट्रांसफर से फर्क नहीं पड़ा। हम जो रहते थे एलडी में 24 घंटे खड़ा, हम एलडी के शेर हैं, हम डरने वाले थोड़ी हैं। लोग कहते हैं मेडिकल वाले केयरलेस हैं, ये हकीकत थोड़ी है। एचओडी सर को है हमारी तरफ से है मोस्ट वेलकम, एचओडी सर को है हमारी तरफ से है मोस्ट वेलकम। अब फैक्टर की कमी नहीं है, पेशेंट को क्या है गम, पेशेंट को क्या है गम। खुदा उनको सलामत रखे, हमें उनका शिकवा थोड़ी है। लोग कहते हैं मेडिकल वाले केयरलेस हैं, ये हकीकत थोड़ी है। बिलाल सर की खूबियाँ क्या लाजवाब है, बिलाल सर की खूबियाँ क्या लाजवाब है। उनकी तरह ड्यूटी करना ये हमारा ख्वाब है। ये वादी है काजी गुन के हैं, मेरे गाँव से दूर थोड़ी है। लोग कहते हैं मेडिकल हीमोफीलिया सेंटर का देखो हाल, हीमोफीलिया सेंटर का देखो हाल, पुरानी बिल्डिंग है खस्ता हाल। अगर ज़लज़ला भी आएगा हमें भागने की जरूरत थोड़ी है। लोग कहते हैं मेडिकल वाले केयरलेस हैं।